Welcome, at long last, to the video I am calling the definitive history of the Olympic and Paralympic mascots, and why many of them are bad. Or why design by committee is a terrible idea. Hi, I'm Graham, and after my Olympic and Paralympic emblems videos, I'd committed myself to doing a video on the mascots, and originally it was just going to be a rundown of all of them and a thought here and there, just sort of like what I thought of them, you know, visually, character-wise, as mascots, and that was going to be the end of it. We'll come back to that asterisk shortly. First of all, why has it taken so long to do this video? After doing the Olympic and Paralympic emblem videos, I'd sort of committed to doing something on the mascots. Why has it taken me like almost 6 months to get around to doing it? Well, one thing is we moved. We moved house. I actually recorded part of this video at our old place, but didn't have time to finish it, and then it was Desert Bus, and then it was the holidays, and it's just been a whole heck of a lot. Yet another reason for the delay. Hi, I'm Graham from the future. Or, I mean, from the past, but not as far in the past as the other Graham. I'll be popping in from time to time through the video to share additional trivia and information that I've learned since recording the bulk of this video. Anyway, another reason for the delay was that I, very soon after recording this video, was diagnosed with cancer, and I'm sorry if you're finding out this way, but that was well over a year ago and I'm doing much better now. So at least it's positive news. Now back to the video. The other reason it's taken me so long, which is directly related to that asterisk of definitive history, is that, as I'm sure many of you will be thrilled to hear, this got out of hand in terms of scope. When I was doing the emblem videos, it was, you know, fairly just like my opinions on the emblems and a bit of trivia here and there, and I was going to do similarly for the mascots. But the trivia became greater than planned because what a rabbit hole I fell down. There is so much to learn about these mascots, and now I know it, and now you have to know it, get to know it. Have to know it. To establish at the beginning, my sources for all of this stuff is the official Olympic and Paralympic websites, which are bad. Those are bad sources if you want to find out interesting trivia about the mascots. If you want to find out that Bing Dwen Dwen is a panda, great. If you want to find out much more than that, they're not awesome. Wikipedia, of course, a website called The Olympic Design, a lot of contemporaneous news articles from the time period, and just a lot of random forums and the Lost Media Wiki. You can't wait to see what I found on the Lost Media Wiki. So while this video is less about my personal thoughts on each mascot's quality as an Olympic or Paralympic mascot, that's still happening. And by the way, my criteria, which is my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, for what makes a good Paralympic or Olympic mascot falls under a couple different sort of qualities. I'm looking for something that visually doesn't look super sanitized and corporate, which many do. I'm looking for something that has character, that's a character with character, that's not just a lifeless, dead-eyed cartoon thing. And I'm looking for a bit of fun and whimsy, because Olympic mascots should be fun. I think children are done a disservice by saying, this is just for kids, we don't need to worry about it, we'll just get a cartoon character and, you know, we'll get some big shiny eyes on it and, you know, the kids will like that. And maybe they will, but you can serve children better by making something that's actually really fun that they can enjoy and connect with. Many mascots do that great. Many don't, and some are just unattractive. And we'll talk about all of them. The reason this video is not being separated into Olympic and Paralympic mascots like I did for the emblems is that as time goes on, they become more and more linked. They sure didn't start that way. And just like with the emblems, information on Paralympic mascots that's available online pales in comparison to what's available on the Olympic mascots. I have done my best, but there is some big information holes surrounding the Paralympic mascots. But as time goes on, they do become more and more interconnected until they are finally treated on equal footing, starting roundabout in 2010. which is more recent than you might think. And finally, before I get started, the last thing about what this video is not, is it is not a ranking. I am not going to be ranking these mascots because there are so many of them. In that way lies only madness. And also, you can't possibly top the original and inarguably best Olympic mascot. Los Angeles Summer Games 1932. Yes, he's the first Olympic mascot. He would be the last official Olympic mascot for 40 years, and he's a real, actual dog. This is Smokey, and he's a very good boy. Look at his little vest. Reports don't agree on whether Smokey was born in the athlete's village or was a stray that was found on the site where they then built the athlete's village. Something to do with that. Smokey was from there, and the games just sort of adopted him as a mascot. There were no cartoons or memorabilia made of Smokey. It's just, this was Smokey, the Olympic mascot, and they made him a little jacket, and he's great. So there you go. There's the best Olympic mascot. You can't argue with that. He's a very good dog. So now we just jump ahead 40 years to 1972 because I mentioned that there wasn't another mascot until then. No, that was the first officially recognized mascot once the IOC realized they were leaving duckburgs of money on the table, but there were other mascots. Are you gonna tell Japan that it can't have mascots? Tokyo Summer Games 1964. Now, strictly speaking, these games didn't have a mascot, but they did make a series of pins with the kappa that were sold and distributed around the games. The kappa in different sort of Olympic scenarios. For those unaware, a kappa is like a Japanese turtle demon kind of thing. Anyway, they show up in Japanese folklore, and so the Tokyo Games decided to do a bunch of kappa stuff. Sure, I can only find these pins. They are okay. Grenoble Winter Games 1968. For the first time on our list today, we have the intersection of adorable and upsetting. Meet Schuss. Schuss is a ball thing. He's a little ball guy on a ski. That's Schuss. Not a lot of information on what he's supposed to be exactly, but the organizing committee for the games made him up. They put him on merch, they put him on branding. He was later retroactively adopted as official later, but at the time he was unofficial, and the IOC actually didn't love that it was a thing that was happening. I don't know why they were so reticent to have mascots initially, but anyway, maybe it's because Schuss just looks kind of strange and weird. Again, adorable and, you know, kind of lovable, but also like odd. I don't know. Go for it. 1968 Summer Games, Mexico. Turns out I just love everything about the branding of the Mexico Games. This is Chacmool. Actually, I don't know that that's true. Hi, Graham from the not so distant past here again. I think there's some confusion in translation here from my original source. We see here in this screenshot of the catalog of Olympic souvenirs from Mexico that this adorable little jaguar is labeled Chacmool plush. That's what that translates to. Please ignore the tiny man on a stick. But a Chacmool is this. It's a specific type of Mesoamerican sculpture of this sort of reclining figure. And this jaguar, that I think is just meant to be a jaguar, is inspired directly from a Chacmool figure of a jaguar at Chichen Itza, which I love. This is such a wonderful idea for a plush toy and a mascot, and you see that his coloring is directly brought from what they believe it looked like originally. But I actually can't confirm anywhere that this mascot has a name beyond just that it's a jaguar. I did find one cartoon image that was used on a lapel pin, and it's the only thing that I can find that exists. There are also some commemorative stamps that feature a dove, and so I guess the jaguar and the dove are the mascots of the games. Or maybe this guy's the mascot of the games. I'm really only just finding out about him now. The jaguar is wonderful, and I love the jaguar, but I don't think their name is Chacmool. But Still very cool regardless. 1972 Winter Games, Sapporo. You can't tell Japan that you're not going to have a mascot. This is Taku-chan. Now, one mildly interesting fact about Taku-chan, he's an Asian black bear. Two more interesting facts about Taku-chan. One, he was designed by Seiko, the watchmaker, because they were the official timekeepers of the Olympics. And so he was used primarily in Seiko stores to sell their sort of Olympic co-branded watches. More so than I think that they were used at the games. Two, this is the first example of the Olympic mascot pictograms that I've been able to find. So every games have their pictograms. I'm not doing a video on them, they're all very similar, but all the pictograms that show off the different sports, and generally speaking, they're redesigned for each games to sort of fit in with the general branding of a given games. But also, there are typically mascot variants of the pictograms that get used for merchandise like pins typically, or for kid-focused signage in and around the Olympic Village. And these are just great because you get a lot of opportunity to show character from these mascots trying all these different events. Also, added bonus, you generally speaking get a shot of the mascot using a gun, which for whatever reason, I just find particularly funny. Here's Taku-chan with a gun. Overall, he's just sort of like a fairly generic looking happy bear. He's fine. He is completely inoffensive, which puts him, you know, in the like upper mid echelons of mascots overall, I would say. Munich Summer Games 1972. Okay, before I get into the mascot, I do have to give a retroactive backhanded compliment to the Munich branding team, because I was a little harsh on their emblem in the emblems video, because it's just sort of like this. But that's because it was designed primarily to be seen as part of the other branding, and that other branding looks great. On its own, the emblem is just sort of like, it's a kind of a spiral shape, but combined with other stuff, very, very strong. So, good job. I get it's better than I initially thought. So now we come to the first official Olympic mascot. Meet Valdi. Valdi is a dachshund based on a real dog that belonged to the president of the International Association of the Sports Press, but the mascot was not that real dog, so Smokey is safe. Because he was the first official mascot and designed by Germans, there was an extensive style guide, which is great, love a good style guide, that said how you could use Valdi and what colors to use. Valdi was not allowed to be produced shorter than 12.5 centimeters so that the emblem, the spiral, and the 5 rings could always be seen on his chest. And the organizing committee's graphic designers, depending on use case, could mix up what colors and in what order Valdi's stripes were, with the one caveat that they couldn't use red or black for Nazi reasons. But lucky for Valdi, he was beloved and sold a ton of merchandise. And they made a ton of merchandise, and they made a ton of money. And so now mascots were pretty much on the table. Also, for reasons known only to the Munich Organizing Committee, the Munich Olympics marathon route, which I cannot find a map of, was arranged to be in the silhouette of Valdi. Like the marathon route was in the shape of Valdi's silhouette. I don't know why, because we didn't have, you know, like drone photography or stuff to the extent that we do now. So it's just, maybe they just said it was. Maybe that's why I can't find an actual picture of it. Maybe they just said it was in the shape of Valdi. I don't know. Or maybe it probably just didn't look very good. But anyway, that's something that they did. Fun fact, Valdi was Munich mascot 2.0. Initially, they were going with a very different design of a different mascot, still a wiener dog, named Lumpy. And they made like a dozen Lumpy toys as sort of as prototypes. And some of them still exist. Poor Lumpy. I don't think there will be justice for Lumpy, and I don't know that Lumpy necessarily deserves it. Innsbruck Winter Games, 1976. 1976 was a weird year for mascots. Here's Innsbruck's. This is Schneemandel. He's got a Tyrolean hat. Tyrol, I've discovered, is a region and was a kingdom in the Holy Roman Empire that spans current Italy and Austria, and this is their hat. Near as I can find out, the name comes from the word Schneemann, which means snowman, and adding the L makes it sort of like snowman, but if it was a proper name. And that was put in as a working title and then just never changed. So sort of snowman, capital S, snowman. Like, my name is Snowman, I guess. I find him a little off-putting in that sort of 1976 R. Crumb cartoony kind of way, just with the sort of the bulbous features and the way that the shading is. The Sid and Marty Krofft kind of style that I've never been a huge fan of. It seems like tailor-made to kind of frighten children. Schneemandal's a very like gentle variant of it, but you know, I don't love Schneemandal, but I don't dislike him. However, for no discernible reason, they also created Sonnenweberl, or Sun Girl, possibly Sun Wife, as a counterpart to Schneemandal. I don't know why. She didn't show up very much, but they did release an album together. It's listed on Discogs. I cannot find any audio from it, or I would be inflicting that audio on you now.
Schneemandel, sag mir, was hast du für riesengroße Hände? Was willst du mit den zwei machen? Ja, zwicken wie am Ende. Damit die Laute klatschen kann beim Schneeplatteln halt noch. Da brauch ich mein Riesenhand, damit so richtig raucht.
I don't know what to tell you. I find them kind of unsettling. Montreal Winter Games 1976. For all the love that I heaped on the Montreal Games branding and emblem, I think they dropped the ball on the mascot, because it's just this. This is Amick. He's a beaver. Beaver is Canada's national animal because beaver was a pivotal animal in the early days of colonized Canada because of the trade in beaver fur. Please hold your jokes, we've heard them all. And Amick means beaver in Algonquin, so at least they get that. And the design even looks kind of slick in that cool kind of mid-century Canada modern sort of way. But it's not a mascot, it's a logo mark. It's actually really similar to the mid-century Parks Canada logo. Where are the pictograms of Amick attempting the luge or firing his gun? I don't know. The rainbow variant is cool, I guess. I think Amick is a cool logo mark and a just very bad mascot. Does none of the things that I think a mascot needs to do. Lake Placid Summer Games 1980. Ronnie the Raccoon is an interesting case. Here he is as a logo mark, and here's some other shots of Ronnie. He's active and all that. He does the job, he shows up, he attempts to do what a mascot needs to do. I wouldn't call Ronnie an absolute banger of a design, but you know, he's functional. He doesn't seem like sanitized and corporate, he just seems kind of lifeless. Though, I do find the pictograms especially hilarious because there's just something about his like wide dead eyes that make it look like he is wholly unsure of how he managed to find himself doing these sports. Especially the bobsled, they all look just baffled. They made a walk-around costume of Ronnie and it is also frightening. Walk-around costumes of mascots are almost universally frightening. Some of them are great, but some of them are just really quite terrifying. This one is still around in a museum in Lake Placid. And for good measure, here's Ronnie with a gun. Thanks, Ronnie. You're fine. Arnhem Winter Paralympic Games 1980. In 1980, we have our first official Paralympic mascots. But just like the emblems, there is so little information available online. I went looking, and the best you're gonna get is something on a random fan wiki of Olympic mascots that just says something like, Noggy and Joggy are squirrels and they were the result of a radio contest. Something like that. So anyway, Noggy and Joggy are squirrels. They came from a radio contest. This is the only image of them I can find. This may be the only image of them that exists. I don't know what to tell you. They're anthropomorphized squirrels. Okie dokie. Moscow Summer Games 1980. If Valdi was the first Rubicon that mascots had to cross in terms of being legitimized by the IOC, then Misha was the second one. Because this is where mascots really connected with the people. Everyone loved Misha. And he sold a butt ton of merchandise. But people loved him. And why wouldn't people love him? Forget Amic's expressionless face or Ronnie's soulless eyes. Misha has a mischievous little smirk like he's up to no good. He's got character, and so many mascots would forget this. Just check out his pictograms. We've got having fun in a canoe, showing off at gymnastics, not sure about this weightlifting thing, and of course, gun. But Misha's popularity extended beyond Russia because Misha was the subject of his own anime. Yes, indeed, produced by Nippon Animation, who made Future Boy Conan, Hunter x Hunter, presumably stuff that isn't 20 years old. It ran for 26 episodes. It's apparently available in Japan on various streaming services. I couldn't find a full episode, but I could find the opening titles. That's all I'm going to show you in case someone out there is still claiming copyright. But don't worry, there's more fun to come because Misha would not be the last mascot to get their own animated series. Not even their own anime, but more on that later. I cannot underestimate how much Russia loved this bear. He is deeply ingrained in the collective cultural memory of the country. Everyone tuned in to the closing ceremonies. They had one section of the stands filled with a big, like, flippy cards version of him, and they made him shed a single tear because he was sad the games were ending. It's a core cultural memory for many people in Russia. And then they released him into the sky to the tears of the crowd, never to be seen again. The balloon fell on a train station several blocks away and was very quickly collected and probably destroyed because the IOC makes them do that. This was such an enduring image of the Russian collective consciousness that they replayed it at the end of the Sochi Winter Games, including a giant animatronic of Misha blowing out the Olympic flame and crying again. I feel bad for this bear.
But don't feel too bad. Misha got a lot of screen time. Hi again. I just have to share some other bizarre ephemeral media that came up while I was doing all the research that didn't really have a home elsewhere in the video. So the first is, they're all cartoons by the way. The first is Misha in a sort of mascot death race. Not death race, but like it's called like Who's Gonna Get the Prize? And it's sort of like which of these characters is gonna win the chance to be the mascot for the Olympics. And I think that's interesting because I'm not sure if this was actually related to any sort of public vote, but Russia would again have a very public television broadcast vote for their mascot for the Sochi Olympics. And we'll come back to that when we get to 2014.
Давай, Миша, давай, Миша! Миша! Миша!
One of the other videos is sort of a moralizing cartoon about being nice and helpful. It starts with a foot race, and then through the course of the foot race, Misha stops to help injured animals along the way, and in doing so completely forfeits his ability to win, for which he is rewarded with being considered first place. And I'm not sure exactly what lesson they're trying to teach here in relation to the Russian Olympic teams, but, you know, that's cool. And finally, a beautifully stylized cartoon that's just Misha fighting the Baba Yaga.
Приветствуют и поздравляют олимпийского медвежонка. Весь мир за.
А Баба Яга против.
And I just had to show you bits of it because it's super entertaining. Alright, that's it. That's all the Misha we have until 1996. Stay tuned.
Anyway, absolute great mascot. Sarajevo Winter Games 1984. Misha was a tough act to follow, and Sarajevo tried, but ultimately I don't think there's much to say about Vuko? I'm not sure where the emphasis goes on that word. Vuko? Is it I hope it's Vuko, because I've been saying Vuko this whole time and it sounds rude. He's a wolf native to the region, and at least he's got character, even if it is more menacing than mischievous. I don't know, it's tough to get a read on him just from from this main key art image. I will say he's got a great singing voice, as seen in these TV idents of him just singing Sarajevo. I like that a lot. He also seems much more confident in his athletic abilities than Misha, though I couldn't find a pictogram of him with a gun. Generally speaking, he just seems to be doing a lot better. He's certainly aware of his surroundings, unlike Ronnie. New York Summer Paralympics, 1984. Well, this is Dan D. Lyon. He was designed by an art teacher, and it's impossible to not say that he looks like someone's stoned uncle. I'm afraid I have no further information or opinion to offer on Dan D. Lyon. Los Angeles Summer Games, 1984. This is Sam. He's an eagle. He's named after Uncle Sam. It's very American. That's fine. No complaints. He honestly does the job of being an Olympic mascot admirably. The thing that bugs me about Sam is that he doesn't necessarily look like an Olympic mascot so much as he looks like a mid-century Disney character. This is Bob Moore, who worked at Disney, and saying worked at Disney is somewhat undervaluing Bob's legacy. He ran the publicity department for 3 decades, and it seems like in a lot of that time he was the publicity department. Amazingly, he still freelanced during that time, and he retired in 1983 after 43 years at the company. Sam the Eagle is his design, who looks like a character that just wandered off the America Sings attraction and onto an Olympic mascot pamphlet. Sorry, what attraction did I just say? Ah yes, that was America Sings, hosted by Eagle Sam, supposedly no relation, though they clearly have the same haberdasher. Now, is any of this a problem? Not really. The games were in Los Angeles and Disneyland is right there. It just feels a little weird to me that he's so on model for the Disney corporate look and feel. Until Japan got a hold of him. Oh, yeah, I bet you didn't think Sam the Eagle was one of the mascots that was gonna get an anime, did you? Adapted by Dax Production, the studio that brought you Hitalia, and judging only by the cover art, a bunch of anime I wouldn't want to watch with my parents, Sam the Olympic Eagle got his own anime. Directed by Kenji Kodama, who's probably directed some other stuff you've heard of, it was the story of Sam, an anthropomorphized Disney-looking eagle, and his sidekicks, Small Boy and Woman with Preposterous Bust, as they battle their ongoing nemesis, a talking cockroach who can possibly shapeshift. Also, Sam's hat is magic and gives him powers. This show ran for 51 episodes. I don't know what else to do with this information other than inflict it on you. Perhaps mercifully, it's considered lost media with only 1 episode available online. Oh, and pictogram-wise, Sam seems to be breezing through the events with absolutely no difficulty, except maybe weightlifting, possibly because of his hollow bones. Oh, and here he is with a gun. Sam, by the way, is just one of the many mascots that doesn't actually go away when the games are over, because he is still the mascot of the LA84 Foundation, which is a Los Angeles-based youth sports group. and in particular, Sam the Eagle is part of a big fundraising week that they do every year. So that's great. Calgary Winter Games 1988. Alright, I get that I'm Canadian, and so I'm supposed to like all of our mascots, but I already didn't like Amick, and I will be heaping praise on Vancouver later, so I'm comfortable saying that I am weirded out by these two strange cowboy polar bears. This is Heidi and Howdy, because Calgary really wants Alberta to be Canada's Texas, and they're more than a little strange about it. They still have the staff at Calgary Airport wandering around with giant white Smith builts, and I'm confident that's not a thing in actual Texas. Apparently they were designed before the rest of the Calgary branding, so there's no consistency in terms of color scheme, and their pictograms weird me out, but here's Heidi with a gun. Oh, and if you're a person who likes sleeping, look away now as I present the walk-around costumes of these characters, a pair of which used to greet people at the Calgary airport, presumably as a warning to arrivals. They also, in further contravention of the IOC's all mascots must be sent to the Phantom Zone rule, appeared on official signage around the city until as recently as 2008. They did get briefly resurrected for a cameo appearance in the 1993 movie Cool Runnings, which means that I am now cursed with a bacon number of 5 with Heidi and Howdy, because of course they were in Cool Runnings with John Candy, who was in Blues Brothers with Carrie Fisher, who was in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back with Brian O'Halloran, who was in an episode of the Escapist News Network with me. Cool. Also at night, when they become ambulatory Five Nights at Freddy's style, they're only one time zone away, so I'm sleeping with one eye open. Seoul Summer Games 1988. This is Hodori. He's an Amur tiger, and his name is a portmanteau of Ho from Horangi, the Korean word for tiger, and Dori, which is a diminutive honorific for boy.
환경을 더럽히는 반칙들이에요. 환경 보존은 나를 위하고 우리 자손을 위하는 일입니다.
He's a good tiger boy. He wears a Sangmo hat, the ribbon from which frequently forms an S for Seoul, and he does everything a mascot ought to do while looking happy and joyful doing it. Here he is with a gun. Apparently, there also existed Hosuni, a tiger girl, who was used very sparingly to the extent that I cannot find a single picture of her. I did find this, but it's very possible it is just Hodori in drag because he had a bunch of different costumes. Hodori, though he looked quite different at the time, was also the mascot for the 1986 Asian Games, which were held in Seoul as sort of a beta test for how well the city would handle the Olympics. There was a terrorist bombing at the airport 5 days before the Asian Games, which I only mention because that explains why we have this video of Hodori telling Olympic goers to be vigilant of suspiciously abandoned luggage.
우리 모두의 안전을 위한 일입니다. 앞장서 질서를 지키고 우리 주위에 위험한 것이 없나 살피는 마음. 우리 모두가 안전요원이어야겠습니다.
Now, finally, the Paralympics were also in Seoul, so while there is still a separation of the mascots, there is at least some continuity of their visual style. And so we get the Gomdori. They were a pair of Asiatic black bears, indicated by the half-moon design on their chest. They were tied together by the leg to indicate overcoming adversity, apparently, and sadly not that the three-legged race was going to be a demonstration sport at those games. For the record, some Paralympic running events do have a coach running alongside the athlete connected by a small length of fabric or a string or something, but usually that's held or it's by the hands, and I guess that the leg was just easier to illustrate because they're holding a baton, which tells me they're part of the relay. I'm not entirely sure what they were going for here. Also, because this is an early Paralympic mascot, this is the only image I have. I don't know, I like them. They're a good pair of bears. Albertville Winter Games 1992. If you know me, you know I like magic. I like sleight of hand. I like illusions. I like playing Magic the Gathering. I'm personally divided on Magique. This is Magique. He's whimsical and expressive, which is great, but he also feels, I don't know, kind of safe. I do like his little hat. He's shaped like a star, and he is the colors of the French flag. And I don't know, I have no complaints, shall we say. Fun fact, this was not the original mascot for the 1992 Winter Games. They were originally going to go with a Vanois goat, to the extent that they minted a coin with a goat on the back, and the actual walk-around mascot appeared on ice at the Calgary Games with Heidi and Howdy and Hidori. I assume all the goat merch is kicking around in a vault somewhere with all the missing episodes of Sam the Olympic Eagle. Oh, and here's magic with kind of a gun. The Paralympics mascot for these games is Alpi. He represents the Grand Mott Mountain near Tignes, who co-hosted the Paralympic Games with Albertville. He's just a happy little mountain riding a monoski, and I got nothing bad to say about him. Barcelona Summer Games 1992. This is Kobe. He's a fairly unassuming Catalan sheepdog, and he is the tip of a media and merchandising iceberg.
Para ti este cariño.
Ahora Colacao te trae a Kobe practicando todos los deportes olímpicos.
Mamá, te quiero más que al Colacao.
Kobe es adhesivo en los botes y troquelado en las cajas.
¡Juega con él!
Colacao, alimento olímpico.
He's visually inspired by Picasso's Cubist interpretations of works by Diego Velázquez, and he's named after the Committee for Olympic Organizing in Barcelona, or COOB, so inspiration comes from many places. Honestly, I like this little guy, certainly more than I like the emblem of these games. This is from a period of time where the Olympic and Paralympic mascots were still very separated, but the gap was narrowing because the Paralympic Organizing Committee would go back to the same designer who designed the Olympic mascot and say, make us for one also in the same style, please. And that's what happened here. So here's Petra. Now, unlike Kobe, who is a sheepdog, Petra is a girl with no arms, who, according to the designer, embodies positivity, extrovertism, independence, energy, and bravery. Okie dokie. Now, we've got to talk about these two as a unit because they were part of the Kobe Troop, an animated series that ran for 26 episodes. But the unique part about the Kobe Troop is that unlike Sam the Olympic Eagle, they licensed it to 24 international markets. It was dubbed into so many different languages. People all around the world got to see the Kobe Troop.
Uma distribuição Mundo Mágico Kobe. Versão brasileira BKS.
Kobe, o mascote genial, vive junto ao mar em Barcelona. Petra.
Kobe, la mascota més genial, viua prop del mar a Barcelona. La Petra.
Kobe, 僕が住んでる青いバルセロナの海でPetra.
The most obscure thing I found about Kobe is a series of live-action shorts made by one Israeli television channel with a walk-around costume of Kobe that I can't find evidence of at the games, where Kobe attempts an Olympic sport, fails, then turns on a TV to watch the games, gets energized with inspiration, and then succeeds. It's baffling.
Max היום! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. והוא מתאושש! נראה שקובי קאבלמקר מתאושש! נראה שמכת הפטיש האיומה!
I don't know, I like Kobe and Petra. They were beloved and they moved a lot of merch, and, you know, they did all the stuff that mascots need to do. Here's Kobe with a gun. Lillehammer, Winter Games 1994. Ha! Every time I forget what they look like. Here are Kristin and Hakon and their horrible piercing eyes. Named for 13th century Norse historical figures, they are nonetheless reimagined as children of today, which is why they're into stuff like photojournalism and environmentalism. Couldn't find either of these two with a gun. Someone on the Olympic Committee made the very smart decision to not create terrifying walk-around characters of these two, and instead, they were represented by walk-around representations at the games portrayed by actual children. Obviously, they need to be in different locations at once, so there were actually 10 pairs of children, each pair from a different region of Norway. Now, unlike Barcelona, the Paralympic Organizing Committee went to a different designer, probably because they'd seen Hakon and Kristin, and so instead they got Sondre, a amputee troll. Again, precious little information exists about him, but I kind of dig Sondre. I don't know, he seems like a cool dude. I don't say that about a lot of trolls. Atlanta Summer Games 1996. Well, here we are. Everyone's been waiting for it. I have received so many messages asking me to rip apart Izzy, the mascot for the Atlanta Summer Games. I'm not here to disappoint you. Izzy is terrifying. Originally named What Is It before a rebrand, and bearing the 5 Olympic rings between his eyes and tail, much has been made of this bizarre creature and the questionable design choices that led to his existence. I'm trying not to use any IOC footage for fear of a copyright block, but I have to show you this little bit of coverage of the closing ceremonies for the previous games of the announcers just being absolutely baffled by this creature in front of them.
Now you're probably wondering who that is. What is it? Exactly right. What is it? Believe it or not, what is it? It is a futuristic animated computer-generated character with large starry eyes, as you can see there. Got a big grin, and he's also the mascot for Atlanta. Yeah, what's it called? What is it? I don't know. What's it called? It's one of the weirdest names I've ever heard. What is it? He's on stage.
There's a great article about Izzy in Atlanta Magazine that's worth a read, but here's a real nugget about his creation. It needed to be non-controversial, so among the submissions was a fox, a gorilla, a peanut called Peter Peachnut, a raccoon, a couple of flames, a tiger, a deer, and the last one to come in was John Ryan's character, which at the time was named High Res. And to their credit, in choosing Izzy, they did choose a character that was not controversial in that everyone hated him. That's probably unfair. Very likely some kids liked him. He was utterly lambasted by the media, but a lot of that was probably also that it was considered laughable that Atlanta would even dare host an Olympic Games. Recall, apart from Izzy, the Atlanta Games actually went off phenomenally well. Like way better than anyone had ever thought that they would, except Izzy. Time magazine called Izzy, quote, a sperm in sneakers, to give you an idea of the tone at the time. Did Izzy get his own animated series? No, but he did get his own animated special called Izzy's Quest for Olympic Gold, which is, despite the whole point of Izzy that he was computer generated from the most modern technology, traditionally animated. And it follows Izzy's adventures in Torch World.
George, please, don't get your son before he brings down the whole ceiling.
Izzy, Torch World citizens do not compete in the Olympic Games. Our job is to tend the Olympic flame, keeping the spirit of the game shining and bright. No citizen of the Torch World has ever competed in the Olympic Games, and they never will.
If you're wondering why his parents sound like every other 1990s cartoon, they are voiced by Tress MacNeille and Rob Paulson. There's also a computer adventure game based on the special.
Lance has to be stopped, and I need you to help me.
And Izzy also got one of those dreadful licensed Super Nintendo platform games. It was developed by a briefly lived company called Alexandria that developed a Demolition Man game for the Sega CD and not a lot else. A big reason people didn't like Izzy, apart from all of the ways that he is that he doesn't remotely say Atlanta, which apparently, according to the designer, was sort of the point, because the designer is not from Atlanta, and he wanted to make Izzy be someone not from Atlanta who was learning about the city. And I know that sometimes I criticize a mascot for being too obvious or cliche, but there should be something to ground them locally. I think it's safe to call Izzy a swing and a miss. Also, before we move on, I'm confident that I remember this, that there was a subplot on the NBC coverage of the games with Izzy being kidnapped from like a parking lot. I can't find any footage of this, but I distinctly remember watching it on TV. And it's such a weird choice because there had been a bomb threat just before days before the games. And so doing this like fake true crime thing. It says a lot about NBC and their opinion corporately of the Olympics, that they had so little faith that their viewers enjoyed the Olympics that they felt like they needed to create a true crime subplot for their horrible Olympic homunculus. I don't know. If anyone else remembers this happening, please tell me I'm not alone. I remember like a Sam Raimi cam, like a POV of going through and like running into it. Anyway, they found him. Darn. He was fine. Now, thoroughly overshadowed by Izzy was the 1996 Paralympic mascot, Blaze. Again, I don't know a lot about Blaze, but they're a phoenix, which is very cool. Don't love the color combination, but it's generally not terrible and all right, cool mascot. The best part about Blaze is that, like Sam the Eagle, they live on. Blaze Sports America, founded after the Paralympics, is still a non-profit that helps disabled youth through sport. Apparently they used to use Blaze as the mascot, but I can't find any evidence of Blaze anywhere on their website. But on their YouTube channel, their avatar is a newer interpretation of Blaze, so that phoenix is kicking around somewhere. Also, apparently Blaze is just like an American national Paralympic mascot because the Transplant Games also uses Blaze, as indicated by this video from 2014 of a brand new costume being made. Long live Blaze, Atlanta's best mascot. That is a low bar, I'm sorry.
But before we leave 1996, I have to share this completely wild piece of media I discovered that has nothing to do with Izzy, but is about the Atlanta Games. So I don't know in what capacity, official or otherwise, this particular animation was created, but it begins as sort of a visual history of the games, being created by Zeus himself, going through the Greek games, up to the modern games. Then we hit a Rubicon where it turns into some very heavy Soviet propaganda about how the Russian national team just breezes through games after games, destroying the competition. And then we transition to the end of the Moscow Games, where Misha flies off into the sky. He drifts on his balloons all the way to America and lands, meeting a boy who appears out of a tree. Now, this being Atlanta, I would have thought this was a peach tree. I was thinking of, you know, that mascot theory for Peter Peachnut. It doesn't look like a peach tree. It looks like some sort of weird acorn chestnut. And I think that this might have been a mascot for the Russian Olympic team for Atlanta. I cannot find information to confirm this either way. But Misha meets this strange nut boy who is not capable of running very fast and wants to do the Olympics, I guess, so Misha helps him train. For whatever reason, they are set upon by a bull who harasses them, but not to worry, because they are saved by Kobe. Yes, the Barcelona mascot from the previous Summer Games, in his Spanish capacity as a bullfighter, I guess, not literally passing the torch from the previous Summer Games to the Atlanta Games via Misha and strange Russian nut boy. This is just a weird thing to exist. And the crossover between Misha, the 1980 Russian mascot, and Kobe, the 1992 Barcelona mascot, is a very, very odd thing that I hadn't expected. But here it is. Right then, back to the video.
Nagano Winter Games, 1998. Okay, before I show them to you, let me explain a couple things real quick. They're called the snowlets, as in snow and let's go do sports. Or it could be snowlets, as in owlets, as in small owls. There's 4 of them, and they represent the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and also the 4 years in an Olympiad. Some of that seems like working backwards to justify it, but okay. Also, Athena, the goddess, is often represented by an owl, and Athena, Athens, where the Olympics started. Okay, here they are. Which is a jarring sight, to be sure. And look, at first glance, they do seem very, the artist was using their offhand, or my 6-year-old could do a better job. But as I get to know them from their pictograms, I kind of love these weirdos. They've got so much personality, and I love that from the pictograms, they don't look enthusiastic about any of the sports. They look like some sort of spirit that is being forced to try the human things. Except for ice hockey. They seem to enjoy hockey. I don't know. They grew on me. The walk-around characters, still weird. Generally speaking, that's the case. But I don't know. The Snowlets, I was initially like, huh, very visceral sort of response. And now I really like them. The Paralympic mascot is also all right. His name is Parabbit, which is a portmanteau of Paralympic and rabbit. And there's very little info on this guy. He was reverse engineered from the emblem, which was done first, but the emblem was designed to look like a rabbit and the character Naga, because the games were in Nagano. They weren't designed at the same time though. The mascot was designed after the fact. It's a little weird. I don't know, he's cool. Before we move on from Nagano, you may not like the Snowlets, that's fine, but I think we can agree that they're better than Snowple the Winter Mouse, who was the early design for the Nagano mascot, and I don't know how else to describe this except to say that he looks stoned out of his tiny mind. So, no great loss there. Sydney Summer Games 2000. Quick, what animal would you say is iconic to Australia? Yes, which is why the Sydney Organizing Committee chose the 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest answers on that question to bring us the triple header of Ollie the Kookaburra, named Ollie for the Olympic Games themselves, Millie the Echidna, named for the Millennium, and Sid the Platypus, named for the host town of Sydney. Honestly, I like them fine. Most people liked them. They're iconically Australian. I don't blame them burning through 3 iconic Australian animals all at once. Who knows when Australia is going to get the games again. It's kind of a cool choice to limit the color palette of the mascots to the colors from the logo. I think that's kind of neat. Their eyes are maybe like a little Pixar, but overall, not bad. They were, however, maybe a little too safe and sanitized, and more on that later, because they were also completely overshadowed by the Paralympic mascot, Lizzie. Lizzie, whose name comes from lizard, for whatever reason, captured Australia's hearts way more than the other 3. Maybe it's because her frill is shaped like the country. I don't know, I think that's neat. What can I say? The Aussies really liked Lizzie. She's great. Now, before I move on from Sydney, it would be remiss of me to not mention the unofficial Sydney 2000 mascot, as I'm sure all the Australians have already yelled at their YouTube, Fatso the Fat-Arsed Wombat. Because not everyone enjoyed Ollie, Millie, and Sid, and so in protest was created this rotund wombat. A creation of a commentary show on Australia's Channel 7, and look to the Australians in the comments for more nuance. It caused quite a stir, particularly when the gold medal winning Australian swimming relay team brought one up on the medal podium with them. Apparently, the Australian Olympic Organizing Committee had uncharacteristically poor humor about the whole thing, but the IOC, when asked if they had banned Fatso the Fat-Arsed Wombat, said this.
There has been a mascot that some of the Australian swimmers have been carrying in called Fatso the Wombat, and there is a suggestion that perhaps the IOC had made some ruling to ban Fatso.
I'm not aware of banning Fatso.
So I'm glad that exists. Australia's mascot legacy extends beyond Fatso the Wombat because in 2021, Lizzie returned as the overall mascot of Australia's Paralympic team on an Australian $2 coin and as part of the promotion for the 2020 Games, which we all lovingly recall was drawn by a furry artist who knew what the clients were asking for even if they didn't. So good job, Lizzie. Salt Lake City Winter Games 2002. Oh, we're just doing trios now, huh? These three were created by a design firm who particularly credit artist Steve Small, who used to work at Nickelodeon and Disney, and they have complete character breakdowns. Powder, the snowshoe hare, named for snow, represents faster, lives in Fish Lake National Forest, favorite color is purple, her pet peeve is people being unsupported, and she will react to that happening by drooping her ears and kicking the snow. Copper the coyote, named for copper, represents higher, likes jello, dislikes unsportsmanlike conduct, and will react by bunching up his ears and howling. Cole the black bear, named for coal, he is stronger, he represents the night. He doesn't like pollution and will react by biting people, so we have no choice but to stand. Created by the same folks, we also have the Paralympic mascot, Otto the otter, whose name means, 8 in Italian, they say. His favorite food is fish. He also doesn't like people who pollute, but he'll leave the biting to Cole and instead resorts to humiliating them publicly. I don't know, I think these four are fine. They're very safe and 2000s and just a little too clean and tidy, and the shot of their walk-around characters looks like a sitcom, and not one that I would relish watching. Athens Summer Games 2004. Well, they ain't clean and safe. Here's Athena and Phevos. And they're an odd-looking pair, but they're based on an ancient Greek artifact, so there's an immediate connection there. They're loosely based on this figure called a Daedala from the 7th century BC, which was recommended by curators at the National Archaeological Museum. Same story as before, the Paralympic Committee went to the same designers and asked them for a mascot in the same style, and they created Proteus, a seahorse, who, in contrast to mascots like Petra or Sandra, has been given extra arms. Anyway, I have very little to say about these folks. They're fine. Honestly, I just don't find them super memorable, is the thing. Though they do have a nice connection to the host city. Even if a pro-ancient Greek group called them a savage insult to the Hellenic civilization of the 7th century BC. I don't feel qualified to speak to that, so here's Athena with a gun. Torino Winter Games 2006. The year was 2006 and Adobe Flash animation was hitting the mainstream, so enjoy the smooth vectored lines and automated tweens of Neve and Gliese. Neve is a snowball, Gliese is an ice cube. There's so little to say about these two. I don't know, they evoke zero emotional response in me. Oh, and say it with me now, the Paralympic Committee went back to the same designers and asked for their own mascot in the same style, and they got Aster, the Flash animation snowflake. I can so easily see this face cursing up a storm in a Newgrounds video, right? It's just so of its time. Anyway, here they are with guns. I don't know, these three do nothing for me. Beijing Summer Games 2008. The Fuwa, on the other hand, do something for me in that I do not like them. There are 5 of them now. Talk about power creep. Their names are Bebe, Jingjing, Huanhuan, Yingying, and Nini, which are doubled parts of the phrase Beijing Huanningyi, which means Beijing welcomes you. So it's like their names are Bebe, Jingjing, Well, Comes, You. I look at these 5 and I see design by committee all over their dead faces, and it's actually so much worse than that. The designer, Han Mei Lin, was originally told that he was getting artistic license to do whatever he wanted, but he had to satisfy so many requests for changes and tweaks and alternates and improvements that he generated over 1,000 different options for the Fuwa, whom he has since disowned. What were those inspirations? Let me tell you. Bebe is a traditional decorative picture of a lotus and a fish inspired by Neolithic artifacts. Jingjing is a giant panda inspired by Song Dynasty porcelain. Huanhuan is the Olympic flame inspired by designs in the Mogao fire grotto. Yingying is a Tibetan antelope, inspired by ethnic Tibetan costume, which is more than a little cheeky. And Nini is a swallow, specifically Beijing's resident bird, a sand martin kite. I don't know, I just think 5 is too many. And if you're told about all those inspirations, you can be like, oh yeah, all right, I see that. But otherwise, they just look like sort of a uniform group of non-threatening imps. Speaking of power creep though, 5 mascots is a lot, but check this. The Fuwa are among the mascots that got their own animated series, and the Olympic Adventures of Fuwa ran for 100 episodes.
还有一种穿盔甲的赛跑，样子很威武。谁最先到达终点，谁就是胜利者。
But that's not all. The show produced 2 spin-offs. The 5 Rings and Bebe's Promise. These are tremendously difficult to track down. I have found precious little of anything, but I did find some. The Olympic Adventures of Fuwa is a very odd 3D CG affair, but the 5 Rings and Bebe's Promise are 2D animation that look like something more out of the late 90s and early 2000s. But I have to share this one thing I found because it's so odd. In this one episode of Bebe's Promise that I happened to watch, Bebe goes to America, and the story of the episode, it's not translated, but you can sort of suss out what's going on. There's a basketball player who can't afford good shoes, so Bebe goes to buy him a nice pair of basketball shoes so he can actually compete. And at the shoe store, look who's there as set decoration in the store. It's Sam the Olympic Eagle! Was his anime that popular? Was this show just animated by Chinese Olympic mascot nerds? What is this? Anyway, literal hours of television of these characters were created. None of it, seemingly, involving the Paralympic mascot, Funyulele, which literally translates to Lucky Happy Ox. I don't have much to say about the Lucky Happy Ox, but I don't know. She seems to be doing her job well. She's fine. Vancouver Winter Games 2010. There's a lot of reasons I like the Vancouver mascots, and not just because the games were here. If anything, you'd think I'd be sick of them because of all their public appearances, but no, let me get into it. Quachi is a Sasquatch, which I think also makes him the first Olympic cryptid. And, fun fact, the word Sasquatch comes from a Ho'okomilam word because the legend of the Sasquatch is an indigenous story of the Pacific West Coast people. Miga is a mythical sea bear, part orca whale, part Kermode bear, the spirit bear of the province. And Sumi, who is a cross between a thunderbird and a black bear. Visually, in retrospect, I do think they're maybe a bit dated to 2010. They're certainly very evocative of the designer vinyl style at the time. Like, you can just look at the art and think, yes, these would make very good little vinyl figures. And they do, and I have them. They're still packed, but they're great. But they're not as dated as they could be. They're no Neve and Glees, and they do have character. And that shouldn't be surprising, considering they were created by the team at Meow Me Design. What should be surprising is that they didn't get an animated series, because Meow Me would go on to create Octonauts. And the team formerly known as, but now maybe known as again, Mainframe, who made like Reboot and everything, who now also animates Octonauts, are based in Vancouver. It's just weird to me that this wasn't capitalized on. What else do I love about them? Well, there isn't 3 mascots. Quachi and Miga are the Olympic mascots, and Sumi is the Paralympic mascot, but they were unveiled at the same time. That had only happened once before with Kobe and Petra, and this really normalized that, holding the Olympic and Paralympic mascots on the same stage, and that would continue going forward. Which also meant they were a unified design, finally. But also, there's not 3 of them because there is another to this mascot mythos, Muck Muck, the Vancouver Island marmot. Muck Muck was the designated sidekick. He's just a super fan of the other mascots. There's a whole thing about him traveling from Vancouver Island over to Vancouver because he just wants to see the mascots competing at the games. In contrast to our Australian friends, there was even a public demonstration in support of Muck Muck to have him officially designated as a mascot. I don't know if that ever happened, but ain't he great? I can also give you a first-hand account that the walk-around characters, particularly of Quachi, were tremendously huggable. These are not to scale. These are 2 different. Quachi is much larger than Miga. That's not relevant now. London Summer Games 2012. I just hate everything about the branding for these games, I'm sorry. Wenlock, named for the Wenlock Olympian Society, accredited with inspiring the modern Olympics, and Mandeville, named for the Stoke Mandeville Hospital, the genesis of the Paralympics. These two unblinking demons are canonically made from drops of metal from the last beam put into place when constructing the Millennium Dome, now the O2 Arena. As shown in this odd CG short where an apparently retiring worker grabs the chunks of metal and forges them into the mascots for his children or grandchildren, it's not clear. Their faces are cameras, which is a weird choice for the most surveilled city on Earth. And the yellow lights on top of their head were meant to evoke a London black cab, which, I don't know, I guess is one of the reasons the locals didn't love them. Surely they have not passed the knowledge. Apparently some kids liked them, and on some level, that's maybe what matters most, but I don't know. They don't say London or even England to me, and their cold, emotionless dancing makes my teeth hurt. Sochi Winter Games 2014. These three are the result of an extensive nationwide contest to select the Sochi mascots, and for some reason, they don't have names? So please meet leopard, hare, and polar bear. Other options in the final round of voting were a dolphin, a bird, some manner of Russian Santa Claus, a bunch of bowling pin snowmen, and is that Sonnenweberl from Innsbruck? Also, here's Snowflake and Ray of Light, who were also in that contest and are now the Paralympic mascots for the Sochi Games. I don't know, these are not doing it for me. There's no whimsy there at all. Like, look at Misha, and now look at Polar Bear. What happened? And speaking of comparing Misha to Polar Bear, Viktor Chizikov, the designer of Misha, accused the designer of Polar Bear of plagiarism, saying, quote, "They just made him fatter." Also, there were accusations that the phone voting might have been rigged after Putin said the polar bear was his favorite. Like, they don't have names. How lazy is that? And I don't like Snowflake and Ray of Light any better. Sochians, as in people who live in the host city, most voted for the dolphin. Whereas the most voted for mascot overall was none of those. It was Zoich, which is like, it's an inverse of the year 2014, and is basically the Hypnotoad. It's very counterculture and mimetic, so it was never gonna win, but points for trying. Here's Polar Bear with a gun. Coward marks for not letting him actually aim it. Rio Summer Games 2016. What a complete turnaround from Sochi to Rio. Check out Vinicius and Tom. Briefly, Vinicius represents Brazil's animal life, and Tom represents its plant life. Nice and simple, great style, kind of adventure-timey without being like copies of it. I don't know, these two just look fun. Following a public vote, they're named after musicians Vinicius de Moraes and Tom Jobim, the co-writers of the song Girl from Ipanema. Sure, for whatever reason, wrestling coaches were given plush dolls of Vinicius to throw into the ring because the rules for wrestling state that the coaches have to throw a soft object into the ring to dispute a referee's call, and they were all given these plushes. So if you watch the Olympic wrestling, it'd just be Vinicius flying into the ring at various points, which is hilarious. And another fun touch, the medalists, at least at the Paralympics, I think also at the Olympics, were given dolls of Tom with the leaves in his hair different colors to match the medal they won. They got their own cartoon series of 32 episodes. The episodes were 2 minutes each, but we still count it. They even got a Lego set. I don't have much else to say. I think they absolutely nailed it. Here's Vinicius with a shotgun. Great job, everybody. Pyeongchang Winter Games 2018. Here are Surang and Banabi, a white tiger and an Asiatic black bear, respectively. And there's just something about Surang's little determined face and his action pose that I love. He's gonna do the thing! Surang's name roughly translates to protection tiger, and Banabi's roughly translates to half moon because of the half moon design. Banabi is also kind of a callback to Gonduri from 1988, who were also Asiatic black bears. In Korean folklore, Baeko the white tiger is a mythical creature that watches over the mountains and nature and is a cultural symbol for prosperity and protection. And also, like Banabi, has a connection to Hodori from the 1988 games, because they're tigers. No animated series this time, but they did make this fun animation to introduce them. So yeah, I like these two a lot. Tokyo Summer Games 2020. You would think that of all the countries to absolutely nail the concept of a mascot, it would be the one that brought us Kumamo, Domo-kun, or Sudachi-kun, the animate citrus creature. But wow, I do not love Mirai Tawa and So Mighty. I don't want to go deep into the selection process for this. I didn't say at the beginning, but so many of these mascots were chosen by contests or public vote or just a lot of design by committee. 2,042 submissions for these mascots. The entries were then subjected to a battery of exams to determine whether they, quote, would appeal to elementary school-aged children and whether they, quote, amply reflect the spirit of the 2020 game's vision. This process then reduced the pool to 3 submissions, which were voted on by 16,000 different schools, with each participating school's class getting 1 vote. So democracy in action, we like to see it. I actually kind of love that. It's fun to include kids in the process. I like that a lot. Sometimes kids have bad taste. This is a minor thing that probably bugs only me, but like traditionally, the mascots either are like bumbling fools when they attempt the actual Olympic events, or they show some sort of physical prowess, like they're as good as the athletes. Mirai Tawa can teleport, and So Mighty has telepathy and telekinesis. Surely they would both be excluded from competition. Regardless, what of the other finalists? I'm glad you asked. They don't have names because the naming came after, but here they are. A Kitsune and a Tanuki, who I like well enough, and a cat, fox, and spirit dog, who are adorable. Now I know what you're thinking. It's the question that crosses our minds every time. Are these mascots getting nasty with each other? Unofficially, yes. Because in January of this year, the artist for these two graced us on his Twitter with this picture of Miraiti, a proposed unofficial future pairing of the two of them. And that's just a lot to take on board. Anyway, no cartoons this time, which is weird because Japan has made cartoons of so many other people's mascots, but not their own. Though they did do these cool animations of them attempting all of the events, which is neat. So we do get the shot of them with a gun. And I like the style, the visual style of these animations way more than the official artwork of these two. I don't know, ultimately the 2020 games, the mascots were overshadowed by the 2020 Tokyo Games being the COVID games that had to be delayed for a year and all that, but I think the mascots were kind of just forgettable anyway. Beijing Winter Games 2022. And finally, Beijing. I like the emblem. Thank you for asking. That's not why we're here. Bing Duen Duen is a giant panda with a suit made of magical ice. I've been watching the Olympic Broadcasting Service feeds because that's what the CBC gets, and this guy doesn't show up anywhere in those feeds. So I don't know. He seems fun at least, but I've barely had a chance to interact with him at all. I will say, I saw a story about there was a report with a reporter broadcasting from inside a Bing Duen Duen costume that had to be taken down, said the clickbait, because the IOC says the mascots can't talk and they must be gender neutral. And as we've seen, mascots talk and they have genders, and I can't find a statement from the IOC that supports either of those things being true, but I guess it makes for good clicks. Please consider subscribing to this channel, I guess. Anyway, I was writing all of this during the games, and even now, I don't really have a lot to like look back on, but I will say Bing Duen Duen was hugely popular, like in Beijing and seemingly with people watching. So great. Like, his visual style is skating, pun not intended, a little close to corporate safety, but there's enough sort of whimsicalness from him there that I kind of dig him. The ice casing makes for a weird plushie though, because they have like a hard plastic and then a plush inside. They weren't thinking about the plush when they designed their mascot to be encased in ice. The Beijing Paralympics mascot is Shui Ron Ron, who is an anthropomorphized Chinese lantern, who I like a bit more than Bing Duen Duen, I'd say. I think it's something about the eyes. When they're in motion, it's fine, but when they're static, Bing Duen Duen looks gormless, and Shui Ron Ron looks like, hello, tiny friend. Also, Ron Ron makes a better plush because he's not encased in plastic.
Yes, we're not done yet. I've done this to myself by taking so long to do this video, but we now know what the Paris 2024 mascots will look like, and so I should talk about them. First of all though, let me talk about the Paris emblem, which I never touched on in the emblems video. Absolutely amazing. 10 on 10 emblem. This thing rules. This is an amazing use of negative space to be both the flame from the Olympic torch and the silhouette of Marianne, the personification of liberty and the country of France. This is just mwah. This is fantastic. You can see Marianne, or Liberty as she's called in the title of this painting, Liberty Leading the People by Delacroix, is wearing a Phrygian cap. Now the history of this actual cap goes like way back to Persians and Iranians, but it also became a symbol of revolutionary France. It became a symbol of revolutionary America as well. In fact, there's still US state seals that use the cap as a symbol of freedom. But it is probably most iconically associated with the Liberty cap of France. And so, meet the Phrygians. They don't have individual names. They are the Olympic Frige and the Paralympic Frige. And you know what? I honestly like them. Their eyes and eyelashes are inspired by France-specific button decorations that sometimes appear on modern variations of the Liberty cap. And I don't know. I think they look like a ton of fun, honestly. I don't know when it was decided that the mascots have to wear the emblem of the games on their chest. I can look at this. I'm doing this video right now. Looks like it was Athena and Fivos. Otto from Salt Lake City has it on his scarf, but it's been consistent since 2004. I don't love it, because it just seems like it's going to mess with designs, but I accept that it's a necessary evil. In any case, I quite like the refrigerators. I appreciate that they're not taking themselves very seriously. They look like they're having a fun time. The walk-around characters look very entertaining, and there's already a whole bunch of terrific pictograms of them out there. Though I have looked deep within the depths of this picture and I haven't yet been able to find a gun, but maybe one of you has better eyes than I. No additional mascots have been announced or revealed at time of this recording, which is August 2023.
There you go! There's all the mascots, and like way too much information about them. I have no final conclusion because head empty, all information has passed to you. I hope that you learned something interesting, that you took something away from this, that you enjoyed watching it, because I spent way too long on lost media holes trying to find clips of an anime that someone told me existed once. I'm just glad that now I've said all of this out loud and I don't have to think about it anymore. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope you liked it. If you have any other fun facts about the mascots, please share them below, Australians. And I would love to hear from you if you liked this video. You can also tell me if you didn't like it. I just am not interested in reading those comments. But I can't stop you. Kwachi, Miga, Mukmuk, and I, we have a Sumi around somewhere. I'm not sure where he's got to. Say bye-bye.